So we were told, Daniel, that life should be on Mars. He's getting you're getting the text from NASA right now. He's getting his sources. Before we get into this space sci-fi stuff. He's got some sources. They're texting right now from NASA, I bet. Maybe even the Space Force. No. Who do you know in the Space Force, Daniel? Do you know anybody who...
Is there a Space Force?
There is a Space Force. There are people in the Space Force at this very moment. And just like people know, or people have family who are in the Marines or in the Army or whatever, do you know anybody who's in the Space Force?
I don't. Okay.
That's one of... Daniel, that's one of my podcast goals is to have an active Space Force men. What do you call them? A Space Force person? Like somebody in the space, because like you call somebody in the Marines a Marine, whether they're a man or a woman. I think cadets. So is it a Space Force cadet?
That sounds right.
That sounds like
be Army, Air Force, Navy. A Navy would be a sailor.
Yes, that's right.
So a Space Force.
So an Army's a soldier, right?
Army's a soldier. A Space Force member would be
I like the cadet. It goes well, Cadet's but cadet nice. Is I think another term for
space
something.
Cadet. Space cadet, yeah, space cadet. Well, astronaut. No, probably not an astronaut. A space soldier. Space soldier. A soldier.
But in space.
Well, what are the...
You could be a Marine in space.
Airmen. That's what the Air Force are called. Airmen. So why they call them spacemen. Spacemen.
But see, we can't use that in 2020 because that's not gender neutral. There's no spaceman. It's just like a space person or a space cadet.
Well, they're still called airmen, but maybe they were named back in the day.
I'm just thinking. Okay. When it comes to... I thought I read somewhere where they were actually doing a vote. They were actually trying to figure that out.
Oh, what they... Well, look how well the Washington Redskins team name has been handled. The Washington football team, which I hear they might be keeping that instead of going to...
It would be ridiculous because that means your mascot cannot be the team itself. You know, so like they're saying they're the team from Washington or the football team from Washington or Washington football team is what they're called.
Right.
But they have no mascot at that point. They themselves are the mascot. Everybody has them, you know, Dallas, you can call them the football team from Dallas, but they have a mascot. It's called the Cowboy. And also do all the other teams. So this team would not have a mascot. They just wouldn't have a mascot.
They would have a mascot. They can make it whatever they want to make it.
But they don't refer to it.
I'm sure there are other examples of teams that are like that. But let's say there isn't. What is a Philly? Is there a name for? Is a Philadelphia Philly? Is that a thing? Is that
but the Philly, you're not. Same with A&M, Texas A&M, an Aggie. An Aggie itself isn't like a tiger is for a mascot, where it's a simple thing, right? An Aggie is like a person, and it can look. There's iterations of it, all kinds of what an Aggie is, but it's still a mascot. We're not the football team from Texas A&M. You know, we're the Texas A&M Aggies. Same thing with like the Cardinal. There's a lot of examples where the mascot itself isn't necessarily what the mascot is. Maybe the illustration, you know, the actual image that they promote. They're two different things. Like I'm trying to give an example. Like remember like the Spurs and they use Wile E. Coyote? Mm-hmm. Completely different. You know, they don't have where. So you can do that, like you said. You can do that, but they still have a mascot. The San Antonio Spurs, and they use all kinds of stuff as the mascots, but they're not the basketball team from San Antonio.
But are you saying that it's necessary for them to have a mascot so that they can sell merchandise? I'm sure they'll be able to sell merchandise very easily.
I still think you can. I had always was believed or was told that one of the reasons for renaming these teams and things, why it's lucrative, is because of the rebranding. So people have to buy new stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, if I had a Cowboys hat that I've had for 5 years, and then they changed the name, and I wanted to stay loyal to the new name, I'd have to go buy something new.
Right.
So that's one of the motives. But if it's just the Washington football team, the motive's not there because, like you said, they're still going to have new branding for that stuff. So people still have to buy that.
Well, we can rename them right here, but
So they're in D.C. and they're Washington. I feel bad for it's too easy to go for the political joke, right? Is that too easy? Because they're in Washington, that's where politics is.
And what would be the name? I mean, the Washington. I mean, why don't they go? You do the Nationals. You could just keep the
name.
Keep
the
the
Nationals.
name, yeah.
No, they'll get sued by the Nationals. They can't let them do that.
Well, either way.
What they refer to it as the Beltway, right? Inside the Beltway.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, what's a Beltway exactly? I mean, a highway. It's like, infrastructure.
It's like inside the loop. It's like inside the 410 or something like that. But so I sent you a couple of topics yesterday.
Yes.
About things that I thought we could talk about on a podcast. And we brought this concept up before of maybe we could sit here on a podcast. We could go through we go through Twitter, look at the trending topics, see what they are, and just do like a rapid fire segment about everything that's trending in the world today. Last night, a couple of the trending topics were one, for example, is life on Venus, which has always been considered a very hostile place for possible life. To be there. There's Mercury, which is closest to the sun, Venus next closest to the sun, and then the Earth. And Venus has been known to be very poisonous. I think it has sulfur oxide clouds. True. And what scientists have learned now, I guess, doing some observations of those clouds and the surface of Venus, is that there is this gas or this byproduct called phosphenes, which are there, which apparently only will occur if there's some sort of biological life on Earth, in that area
within the same atmosphere or environment.
Right. So that's very interesting. It's big news for a lot of scientists. What's interesting, I looked into it. I clicked on the Twitter link and looked into it a little bit. And what they say is that if you're actually on the surface of Venus, the environment it really is very very hostile, and the pressure is so great that that the life really couldn't survive there. But that as you go higher into the atmosphere, there's like a Goldilocks zone, or a perfect area where life can survive. So it's an interesting way to think about something, is that you're not on the surface, but because the pressure is so great at the surface, as you go higher, the pressure isn't as great, and maybe the temperature isn't as hot. And so it's a very interesting
it makes sense
discovery.
It makes sense because even on our own planet, there's certain areas on Earth that you don't find much life for many reasons. So I think it was foolhardy to just discount all of Venus because of perhaps the surface, what's going on at the surface.
Yeah.
Okay. What's interesting about that is this has been done or illustrated in the movies, specifically Star Wars. I think maybe this is episode, then would have been episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, where they go to Lando, remember, and he betrays them, but he goes to the Sky City. They're in the clouds. It's this colony of life on some planet, and they're in the clouds. Yeah. They're not on the surface.
Yeah.
They could have been on Venus, for all we know.
There's a whole group of people that are going to watch this and say, going to talk about who exactly Lando was, and what planet he was on, and what atmosphere was there, and what the city's history was, and what language they spoke. But we won't get into all of that. But it is, it's very interesting because, like we just talked about, the Goldilocks zone, which we assume that we are in, right? The Earth is in this Goldilocks zone, and that's known as the area where life is most likely to occur outside of a sun, or that's surrounding a star. So you have Mercury, Venus, which we assumed was not in the Goldilocks zone, which would not be hospitable for life, and then you have planets that are further out past Mars that we would assume are not hospitable for life. And we've been looking at these stars and these planets further and further away, and we've been noticing that, not us, but scientists have been noticing that almost every star out there in the galaxy, the majority of them have planets within this Goldilocks zone. But now, with this Venus discovery, maybe we say that Goldilocks zone is actually much bigger
Well, a lot of times when we were talking about all the planets that were in, basically the opportunity for life has just grown, because if we were in the past, scientists were using the Goldilocks to kind of get a more realistic estimation, right? So there's 10,000 planets, X amount are in this Goldilocks, or whatever. Well, now if they can add more,
right?
So like just look at our own solar system. Perhaps Mercury, still too close, and then whatever Uranus is too far,
right?
But we were always only ever really kind of looking at Mars in our own, and it's always Mars as in the past, not like any future, large extraterrestrial biological entities, right? We're talking about like microbes.
Right.
And what we've discovered is that many of these intense environments where we had believed and just assumed that no life could exist, we are finding now, even in our own planet, where we have similar atmospheres, that there actually is life. These single cell organisms in these areas, like at the very, very bottom of the ocean, or in these volcanic the shaft things, where it's like superiors, all kinds of much carbon and all these other different things, right?
Yeah.
They find these microbes. Right. So if they can live in these conditions here on Earth, there's conditions like that in space, in the universe.
Yeah.
That they're alive.
And there's so many. I mean, I'm gonna make a statement and then ask you a question about what your beliefs are. But there's billions of stars in our galaxy. There's billions of galaxies in the universe. Just within our solar system, we find out now that Venus may have had life, may have life. Mars may have had life. We discount and we don't think about as much the fact that we had, before humans were here, there was hundreds of millions of years of dinosaurs in every nook and cranny of our planet of Earth. And it's mind-boggling to even think about that, that
evolutionary process.
Well, just mind-boggling to think that there were dinosaurs living for hundreds. I mean, humans have been around. If longest estimates are 200,000 years in our current form.
Sure.
But and only in the recent couple of thousand years have developed this advanced society. But there were hundreds of millions of years that went by with dinosaurs ruling the Earth. But we also have the moons of Saturn and Jupiter that supposedly have oceans underneath underneath their course, which also could be a breeding ground for life. But what are your thoughts? What do you think? Is there intelligent life, and not just life, but intelligent life outside in the universe?
Unfortunately, a couple of things. I think we're all going to be slightly let down, because there's this theory. It's not my own. I heard it somewhere. But the assumption is that there's so many planets, and even more so now, because why can't there be intelligent life on the moon of some planet, And now we're even realizing, you got to stop thinking about the planet as a whole being, nothing lives in Antarctica. So when we're talking about life on Earth, we're talking about life on Earth sans Antarctica, because nothing's living there. So there can be other planets that right off you could discount or not think, but there could be this tiny area within this large planet where there's life for some some biological reason, some geological reason. There's this Eden where everything else, and it could be underground too, where you can't even see. How are you going to know?
Right.
But the point I'm making is, so people say, okay, so now we're even added, the numbers are even better in terms of the odds for life. And what I think the disappointment is going to be is that there is life, but there are these tiny organisms. There's no large, intelligent life. And the reason, and this theory goes, is that if we look at ourselves, but there's no reason to believe that other intelligent life would be any different. And so one of the theories is that any any future, so we have all these other planets, and maybe they're thousands of years ahead of us. We're talking about the timeline that you were talking about, where there's millions of years of dinosaurs. So can you imagine if we've been here for another million years, etc.? So you have these future generational, Star Trek type civilizations, and the theory says that no one has ever made it there. So if there has been other humans or intelligent life like us, but they're still dealing with the same issues that we're dealing with, the traveling, the vast space of the universe, right? They can't travel it either, okay? And before they are ever able to do that, before any intelligent life, wherever it may be on the universe, is able to master this technology where they can truly travel space, they destroy themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, they before they can get there, they end up destroying themselves in one way or another. So it'd be like us. The example would be here, on Earth. I almost referred to it as the United States. It's hilarious. But here on Earth, you can imagine in 100 years, on all the dystopic type novels and things we look into, it's all doesn't end well, right? And so this is the same theory that wouldn't be unique to humans. This would plague all other advanced civilizations and aliens all over the universe, and that they would never be able to get far enough to at some point they would destroy themselves.
Yeah, that theory is actually known as Fermi's paradox because of the physicist.
Okay.
Nikolai Fermi.
Yeah, I know.
I made that name up, but
I knew that guy. I thought he sent me an email one time.
But Fermi is really the name of the guy, and it is known as the Fermi's paradox. And it was supposedly come up with when a bunch of these physicists were, breaking down the numbers and saying, okay, there's, billions of galaxies, billions of planets in each galaxy, billions of stars in each galaxy. And so, if there really is life, and it does it does become in existence on these different places, then where is everybody? And he said, well, they have to get past this point. First of all, if they're going to be able to signal us or receive signals, they have to be technologically advanced. And every society, before they get to the point where they can start traveling space, is going to come to a point where they can destroy themselves using that technology. And so the question is, at some point, did they all destroy themselves? I mean, that's a good question. We got to that technological capability once the atom bomb and the hydrogen bomb and splitting atoms became a technological possibility, and we have avoided it, self-destruction, so far. But that's not the only way for things to go south. I mean, for example, the dinosaurs 66 million years ago just were hit by an asteroid and that's another thing. I mean, space is a hostile environment, and a lot of places maybe there was a place that was about to unlock the secrets of the universe and be able to fold it in on each other and travel, to the next star just by walking through a door. But as soon as they figured that out, an asteroid hit them out of nowhere, and they couldn't stop it.
No, that's a perfect example that right when they're almost there, that could happen. You watch shows on TV about asteroids destroying the planet. It still could happen. They tell us the odds are always. They always say, "Oh, something's gonna happen," or like the super volcano in Yosemite or Yellowstone. That's gonna blow up at some point. It could happen today, but it may not happen for another 400,000 years. Mm-hmm. Okay, because they say that was the last time it happened. But when it happens, it's gonna be world-changing event. Well, in this time frame again that we're talking about, 400,000 years is nothing. Okay, so like you're saying, 400,000 years from now, if we were still alive, it could take 400,000 years to develop that technology of, traveling the stars, right? No such thing. The speed of light is nothing. There's no such thing. Everything is relative, right?
Right.
We could be there almost 400,000 years from now, and then right when we get it, boom, the motherfucker blows up. All right?
Yeah.
So that's a great example for sure. I think it's part of, I think, hubris within humans to, we hate to be limited in our imagination. So as long as you can imagine these things, then it's possible.
Yeah, I mean,
but it doesn't make it plausible.
Yeah, we are in a period of growth and expansion and technological development that's never been anywhere that humankind has never experienced before, and we're living in a revolutionary time period. Not just politically. I'm talking about just the way we're living. I was talking to my dad and my sister earlier about, she had watched this documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, which I haven't watched yet, but it goes a little bit to what we were talking about the other day, which is that all this data, we are the product.
Mm-hmm.
When you go on Facebook, you go on Google, you go on Twitter, you're not there. They're not providing you information out of the kindness of their hearts. Your information is being sold to companies so they can market to you better. And it's a great marketing tool. Obviously, I haven't used it yet. You've used Facebook marketing a little bit. But we're in the midst of a revolution that we don't know what the outcome is going to be or what the side effects are going to be. And we don't know where technology is going in terms of maybe tomorrow we figure out how to travel space. Or maybe, like you said, in 400,000 years.
Well, what's interesting about that technology in general is there is, like you said, we're in this revolution of technology, and where things are going to continue to speed up. I know that we have genetic capabilities currently that the only reason that can be done in labs that actually can be done that aren't as sophisticated as sophisticated as you would think. And the only thing that's holding it back is ethics, really, in governments, because it has the ability to be such a disruption to economies and things that are going on that they're holding it back. Mm-hmm. And so I would imagine, so we're talking about all these technological advances, like these are constitutional rights. Like we're just going to get them. Right. Like we're just going to everyone's just going to have them. And that's another topic that we could go a whole long pathway in, which I think it's silly to assume that that's going to be the case. Because even now, we could have a technology that would heal you. That cured cancer. And I'm not completely sure that everybody would have access to it, or it would be widespread, that they would keep it secret. They would find a way to utilize it in a way that they saw fit for as long as they could. And that's what's going to happen with some of this technology. It's amazing that that the masses have been allowed to have this kind of technology right now. But if you look at it, we've only used it at our own to our own detriment in some ways, in terms of spying all the information that they have on us, right? So for them, is it a risk to give us this power in our hand, but at the same time, they're gaining so much too. So it was kind of a win, it balanced out. But there will be other technology in which I do feel, again, they're not constitutional rights. They're not just going to be given. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's going to make the future interesting, especially when it comes to, because you're looking at it now, politicians are already trying to get into some of the technology when they're talking about social media and that type of technology.
Yeah, it's a topic that we should get into. I kind of want to regarding, when they said, they're going to have access to all this information, but guess what? You get to follow them around and listen to everything they say in their deepest, darkest, secrets and thoughts. And that's a trade-off that I think, most corporations and governments are willing to take is, they get access to all this information, but you're also getting access to their entire lives and their locations. But let's take a break and look at this video real quick. Test.
So bring us in.
All right, man. Well, I texted you yesterday about a couple of topics.
Okay, I remember.
Because when we were talking last time, we said one good idea might be to look at Twitter to find trending topics, to talk about them during the podcast. It makes it so not everybody's on Twitter, but the general Twitter trending topics, most people know about them or they're in the news in some way. So a couple of the trending topics that one we already discussed is the life on Venus, or a possible life on Venus due to the phosphine gas. The other two topics that I said, hey, these might be interesting to talk about is one is Andrew Gillum. Now, if people don't know who Andrew Gillum is, he was a gubernatorial candidate for Florida, I believe.
That's right. He was the mayor of Tallahassee.
Okay, and he was a real popular African American man. Was gonna bring Florida a Democratic governorship, and I think it was after he lost. He lost a very close race.
That's right.
In Florida, and then maybe I don't know how long after it was, but he was caught up in a scandal where he was found to be with a male escort who had overdosed on methamphetamines, and Gillum tried to cover up by saying he was at a wedding with some friends and going to a party, and he basically denied the whole gay, homosexual drug party.
Yes,
that was happening.
The obvious. He tried to deny the obvious, but turned it into.
So then that's obviously a terrible scandal, and he's a married man. I don't know if he has kids or not, but he just recently, yesterday or the day before, came out on an interview that he does not identify as homosexual, but he identifies as bisexual. And so he was one of the trending topics in the news. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about for a couple of reasons. But one of the interesting topics is that you don't normally hear of individuals, at least I don't, I'm not part of the culture, but you don't normally hear at least I don't hear many people identifying as bisexual as opposed to homosexual or heterosexual.
Well, one of the the whole thing on the being bisexual is, for a long time it was kind of not given much. It was kind of, I'm trying to belittled, kind of, as some kind of, not exactly someone's sexual, their preference, but it was like a fad or a phase, or like girls are bisexual when they're in college. All these different kind of stereotypes of being bisexual. Now, for Gillum, who is married, and he does have, looks like he has 3 children. He may have more now. I don't know how old this photo is, but he has children, married with children. Now, there's a couple ways you can look at this. How he's saying he identifies as being bisexual, because surely, he would fit, perhaps. It's hard nowadays to give definitions to these things, right? Because it's very fluid, right? But it would somewhat fit the stereotype of, okay, he's married with children, but he's still attracted to men because he was with a male escort, right? And now that he's implying he's bisexual, he's not even trying to cover up the whole fact that, or the whole incident in which he was in a hotel room with a male escort, and there were drugs there, right?
Right.
So he goes straight into the, okay, I have relations with men, but I'm not gay. And if I was gay, if I was a gay man, I would kind of be slightly offended.
It's interesting because the question that you really got to, the ultimate question is he telling the truth? Is he really bisexual, or is he homosexual? Mm-hmm. Or is he heterosexual that he just got into he got into a phase in his life where he was he became homosexual for a while. It's hard to trust him.
Sure.
Because he lied about what he was doing there in the first place. Of course, that was damage control right away. He didn't know what was going to happen, and it's a sad situation. I wouldn't I hate that it happened to him. But he's a public figure.
Sure.
He was running for governor on a family values platform, I'm sure. And then this occurs, and he obviously shirks the responsibility at first by saying that this isn't really what's happening. And now he's saying he's bisexual, and I guess you just gotta trust him.
Did he admit to any of the drug use or the amphetamines, the methamphetamines that were there? Did he admit to that?
I don't know.
Or just the male escort was using?
I don't know.
I don't know. You see, that's another thing when you're talking about the scandal, right? So it's scandalous in the sense that he's a public figure. So when these things happen, they happen to, whether if it would have been another woman, not his wife, it still would have been a quote unquote scandal. Right. It just makes it, the scandal go another way, another path when it's happened to be a male escort. We know this man to be, if he was doing a some type of progressive meeting and he had to announce his preferred pronouns at the beginning of this meeting, I'm sure he would have said he, him, right?
Right.
If I'm doing it right.
Right.
He would have identified himself as he, him, not whatever. I don't even know what the bisexual person says or how they want to be identified. I guess it's still he, him. That has nothing to do with some things. But he didn't identify that way when he was running, campaigning, up until the moment that he gets busted. And then up until, a couple days ago?
Right.
Breaking news?
Right, and he apparently, and I watched, there was a little, like a 5-second clip where it's because the interviewer didn't ask him if he was homosexual or bisexual or heterosexual, because apparently his wife and him have worked it out and they're going to stay together, which is great. I'm happy for him, happy for his family. I'm
happy for his kids.
Yeah, happy for his kids. But the interviewer didn't ask him, hey, are you? But he just volunteered. He said, hey, I know you didn't ask if I was homosexual, but just I want to let you know I don't identify as homosexual. I identify as bisexual, which that's, like I said, we just got to believe him, and hopefully. I'm curious to know if this male escort in any way was, the ephemerate type, a very feminine looking. Whether the person was just another. Again, a stereotypical looking man, or was it a male escort who appears to be very feminine style, in that the reason why I'm saying that is because in many cultures, or in some cultures, I don't want to say many, but I did watch this. It was like on National Geographic or something. All right. I want to say it was in India where, there's this whole, festival, festival kind of within, I think it's Hindu too, because it has to do with the gods and stuff like that, in which men actively seek out other, transsexual women, men who are dressed up as women, and they have relations, but it's like just during that one time, just during this festival thing that's going on. Yeah.
Okay. And if you were to ask these Indian men who participate in this, I'm sure they wouldn't identify as being homosexual either.
Right.
I'm married, I have a wife, so it can be done. It is done in other places as well, in terms of having relations with the same sex, but then not, identifying it at all as being that being your preference.
Yeah. Well, it's a topic that I think is interesting and should be explored. I mean, it's not something that I am an expert in or that I have much knowledge about, but you could have somebody on that's like a psychologist and can explain some of these things, because it's an interesting topic and it's very relevant.
And it really isn't. So one of the questions you were saying is like nobody knows but him, in terms of if he's being honest with us, he's being honest with himself. Has he always been, from the time that you have attractions to anything as a young person, whether it's he's a man, so if he's having them towards women, but then also towards men, so could he recall being 15, 16, being attracted to both, and that why he refers to himself as being bisexual? Or because there's so many examples, not of celebrities, but just normal normies is what we're called, right? That's what some of these YouTubers call normies, just normal people. I know specific examples that I know of in which a man and a female are married, have kids, and then one or the other leaves, they get divorced, and then the other one ends up being involved in a same-sex relationship after having been married and kids and stuff like that. So this is not an uncommon thing in which, where had they always felt that way? That would be perhaps a good guest to have if we wanted to, delve into this whole Andrew Gillum, this whole psychology of what's happened to him. If one thing you said is that it is bringing this to the forefront a little bit, people. This isn't exactly the easiest table conversation.
Right, but it's but it's something that's happening in society. It's something that should be talked about. It's something that
shouldn't be too
not
taboo
everybody
amongst adults
understands. No, it's not. I think it can be addressed, and it should be addressed. And there's people that know about it, know more about it than you and I, that could answer some of these questions. I'd be interested to see. But one of the other topics that was trending on Twitter yesterday that could be a game changer, a good showstopper, is that Joe Rogan invited Joe Biden and Donald Trump to host a debate, essentially, and Donald Trump took him up on it. He said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And so it's just another example, in my opinion, of Donald Trump's mastery of the media and his ability to see angles and to see openings that most people wouldn't see and most people wouldn't take advantage of. But it's a genius move, in my opinion, because it's a guy, Joe Rogan, who has mass appeal, millions and millions of followers, and the other thing is Donald Trump knows 100% that Joe Biden is not going to do that interview.
Sure.
So it's interesting in a lot of ways.
Trump had nothing to lose on it. So how that happened was that was his episode with Tim Kennedy.
Yeah.
And Tim Kennedy, being a veteran, former UFC fighter, he's a conservative Republican, right? And so he is a Trump supporter. So when he got off of that show, maybe even during the show, I don't know exactly when it was, he was the one who kind of tweeted at Trump saying, "Hey, here's an idea." And Joe Rogan, I think, retweeted it saying he was game, and Trump came on and said yes, he would do it too. And you're absolutely right. When it's a win-win for Trump, because he wins because he said he'd do it, so he has courage. And then if Biden says he doesn't, then he looks like a coward, right? And so nobody wants to be put in that position. They almost need to, because of Rogan's popularity, people were going to hear about this. And if Biden's team needs to be very careful about how they respond to this, because a straight up denial is not good.
Right.
So that is part of the mastery. Like, when part of being successful in anything in life is recognizing the opportunities, right?
Right.
And opportunities come. This is a big debate we're having in society in general, right? Is all these opportunities. Where some people don't get opportunities. Well, yeah, that's true. But you know what? Some people do get opportunities and don't take advantage of them. That's the whole other thing. Everybody can get the same amount of opportunities. Not everyone's going to take advantage of them equally, right? So here's an opportunity presented itself, a gift. Tim Kennedy's no fool. He knew what he was doing, okay? Lays it up, tees it up for Trump, and then Trump knocks it out of the park, knowing. And so this was a terrible situation for Biden to be in having to. Well, how do we respond?
Yeah.
What would you tell him? And what do you tell him?
But you're right.
You're
right. It's a minefield, and how to address this for Biden, because a lot of people don't like Joe Rogan and think he's alt-right, or think he's he's Antifa. A lot of people see him a lot of different ways, but it is a free-form, long-form show that is the best. Everybody knows that these debates that we've been having, the Democratic presidential debates, they're just ridiculous. These 2-minute responses, canned responses with applause pauses and things like that. They're just, nobody's getting any points across. Nobody is making any real sense. They need a Joe Rogan forum where Trump can go on and Biden can go on, is the only real way to know what these people are saying.
This is what they're going to do. This is the only saving grace Biden has. They need to do what he needs to come back and agree to is like they've done in the past. I forgot what they call it, like a town hall or a forum is what it is. So it's not a debate. We're not going to be on there at the same time, because one thing that Biden's camp can say is that, hey, Joe, you're not a professional moderator. These guys are going to show up, and the worst thing that can happen is they do show up, and then it just becomes this big cluster crap, and you can't control. They're talking over each other. Biden just gets up and walks off, or some crap, BS like that, right? So, but what we can do, because we do like you and your audience, we do like where you're going to go with this. So why don't we do like a town hall or a forum? So they both one day or in the morning, Biden comes in, and then in the afternoon, Trump comes in, and Rogan does a show with both of them.
That's a good idea.
I think that's a compromise.
Yeah.
Where they both still then get a long format to talk about what they want to.
That is a good idea. The only problem is and I want to see how, I don't know when the debates are supposed to happen, but the actual debates between Biden and Trump, because I think there's supposed to be 3 or 4 before the election. The problem is, and I'm not a Trump supporter at all, but Biden's performance is a concern. Is a concern. I think, and it should be. I think anybody who is not paying attention or is paying attention and denies the fact that Biden has some issues with his performance and his ability to speak coherently at length is not telling the truth. I mean, I do not want to elect Biden. I don't want to elect Trump either. But I think somebody needs to address it. It's like this big, huge, it's like a 500-pound gorilla sitting in the corner of a room that nobody's willing to look at and talk about. Well,
that's where the media, unfortunately, is doing the public a disservice. That's why Biden for a long time was, and Trump has been hitting them at it because of it. Biden was in his basement, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he wasn't in his basement, but he was not in the public for quite a while. He's been out more now. There's been several people that I've seen that I found to be credible. So one was his stenographer. This was his official stenographer who was with him for like 8 years, who wrote a book. And I hate this, to be honest. I hate it because being disloyal to me is, one of the lowest rungs on the totem pole, okay? So when you work for somebody and then you leave and then spill the beans on them for your own promotion, right, I don't find that to be high regard, right? Mm-hmm. So this guy, but he writes a book, but he's credible. So you got to think, well, what kind of axe does this guy have to grind? Because that's the other thing. But he's giving these examples in where this is how Biden acted 8 years ago, and this is how he was, and then this is how he was 4 years ago, and then this is how he was all the way up until, so from 2008 to 2016, and then now he's giving his analysis over the last couple of years. And so here's a guy who was with him, very intimate situation, saw him, how he talked and stuff. So this person would know. And so he's saying, he's fallen off. Yeah. It's not the same Joe. Yeah. It's just not the same Joe. If at this point, if you're voting for Joe Biden, it's two things. It's one, you're voting because you're a Democrat. So you're voting for the Democrat Party. Mm-hmm. And there's people who aren't so happy with Trump, or who never were and still aren't or are not. But when they vote for Trump, they're voting because they're a Republican. They're going to vote for whoever is the Republican on the ticket. Yeah. Same way for many Democrats. They're going to vote for whoever, whether it's Biden, Hillary, it doesn't matter. Or there's a lot out there who going to vote for Biden just because they have TD, anybody but Trump as well, right? So that's where Biden's going to get the majority of his vote. Nobody's voting. Even Democrats know. No one's voting for Biden. Yeah. They're voting for Democrats or they're voting against Trump, in my opinion. And that's where, that's where if I'm telling Biden, if Biden, people are lying to him anyways. No one's telling him the truth. That's a problem when you're elevated to this level. So no one's telling him the truth. They should be telling him, listen, you should go on Joe Rogan. You need to do something to change the attitude of people. So this is your perfect opportunity. Yeah. It's hit or miss because it could just completely destroy him even more so. Or hurt his chances.
Like I said, that we need to see what happens at the first actual debate to see, what he does. Everybody, I think, knows what's going to happen when Joe Biden gets up there. He's going to say, what he's practiced to say. He's going to get caught a couple of times forgetting what he's talking about. He's going to, try to be tough against Trump. But I think everybody knows exactly what's going to happen. He's not going to step up. He's not going to rise to the occasion. That's, I think, a foregone conclusion. And everybody's kind of accepted that fact. And that's the crazy thing about it. I get not wanting Trump in office. And I prefer anybody but Trump. even if it's Biden and Biden has to sit in the corner while Kamala Harris does everything, which is going to happen.
Kamala,
if he wins.
She already let that slip.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that? Where she talked about in a Harris administration? So she already let that out of the box. Yeah. Okay, that was a secret she couldn't hold.
But why are they doing this to us? Why? I mean, the DNC. What are they thinking? I mean, there were plenty of decent candidates out there. To put Biden up there, knowing the stage that he's at, it just makes everybody. Because if he does get elected, and I think it's a close race. I think it could go either way. But if Biden does get elected, it just makes us look so much worse. I mean, we already look bad for having Trump as a president.
Oh, but then having an old, feeble man as your president?
Yeah, that's bad. And having
that's
a man, it's not a good look to have you know when you're in that position that the government or the people in the country are not running the government, are not electing their people. It's the entities that have been put in place. The DNC is electing your president, or the RNC is electing your president. It's not the people. And we all know, based on the WikiLeaks, that the DNC or the RNC, they're all pulling their own strings. They're doing whatever they want. They don't care what the people want. They're going to put Hillary there over Bernie, or they're going to put Biden there over Bernie, because they need to stay in control. They have to maintain their power.
Yeah, the individual, the politics within the political parties themselves, right, and how power is reached, the decisions that are made, definitely are not made based off of what the people want, because nobody wanted Biden. That's how, basically. And the reason why they decided him was because they decided that it was preferable to have Biden be the candidate early on than to allow for any of these other ones that you mentioned, perhaps Bernie Sanders or Buttigieg, to become the candidate, but at the expense of a long-winded primary season. They didn't want that for some reason. I don't know why. These people are supposed to be the insiders and the experts in partisan politics, right? So they must have said, hey, listen, if we let this just draw out for a long time, Biden probably ends up losing out of it and Bernie wins or somebody else. But it's going to cause, we're going to do, I think they were referring to like a circular firing squad. The person who wins is going to be so wounded from having that battle in the primary that they're going to limp into the general. And so we can't have that. We just need to everybody needs to bow out. And they orchestrated that amazingly well. Remember when all those Buttigieg and the Minnesota Senator, what was her name? They all bowed out. Yeah. They all got out. Klobuchar. Yeah. They all got out at the same time.
Yeah.
That completely helped. And Trump brings this up where he says, man, they all screwed Bernie. If they would have gotten out at a different time, Bernie would have won those and he would have been ahead. And so it just goes to show how nefarious.
I mean, it really could have been anybody else. I mean, Buttigieg, Yang, anybody. Mm-hmm. And I know for a fact that there would be enthusiasm. There would be enthusiasm going into November. I mean, nobody's even talking. I feel like nobody wants to acknowledge the fact that Biden's at the head of the ticket and is representing the Democratic Party.
They're counting on the enthusiasm to vote against Trump is so high.
Yeah, that's a bad way to do it. That's a bad way to. I agree. That is high. It's definitely enthusiasm to vote against Trump for sure, but it's not high enough.
Yeah.
It's not good enough. If you had an Obama running against it, then you have something. But if you're just running against Trump, that's difficult.
And that was one of the mistakes that Hillary made, was really they focused. They thought that Trump was so beyond the norm that people would, right away they laugh off his candidacy, and we just kind of let him destroy him. We'll give him the shovel to dig his own grave, right? And that was the poor strategy.
She probably I bet you she had like 6 months advance notice of like the Access Hollywood tapes, and they were like, we're just gonna wait for that to come out.
Oh, something else is gonna come up. Dude. It's gonna be insane.
Yeah.
I've read several articles about those deep fakes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
No.
The deep fake. So apparently the technology the deep fakes, where it changes your face they can manipulate, superimpose somebody else's face on a person's body, and it looks, I'm talking high end. And what they're concerned is that that technology is becoming very inexpensive, that anybody can do it. So now the technology, I mean, you got to go to a movie studio, a professional movie studio, and do it. There's all these traces. They'll know that it's easy, you know, they'll know who did it. But now, because the technology is so ubiquitous, you know, it's just out there and cheap, that then any partisan operative who wants to make it look like Trump was, you know, in this Moscow hotel can do it.
That's another thing that I wanted to,
and it'll look real.
I think is important that we talk about, and is important because I brought it up the other day, and I was talking to my dad. I said, you know what? Everybody knows it for a fact, but nobody is talking about it. Is that we are being subjected to propaganda that's being generated by adversaries to our government, and we all think that it doesn't affect us because we're too smart to fall for propaganda, but propaganda works. Commercials work, advertising works, propaganda works. It's all, you know, going to affect your psyche. And the question is, does it matter? Just because I see a bunch of memes or a bunch of comments on Facebook, is that going to sway my opinion? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But what it is doing for sure is it's causing what you and I see, and what everybody sees, is this hardcore hardening of people on the right versus people on the left, and there's nothing in between. There's a gap growing, and there's a hardening of hearts on either side. But maybe there really isn't. Maybe it's just what we're seeing that's being created by Russian and Chinese and other people that are interfering in our politics, or because we've made it so easy through social media.
Sure. You know, I think people's opinions, if you go back 20 years ago, there was just the percentages of people and how they felt were the same. It's just they didn't have the ability, the outlet to let everybody know, right? So now the outlet to let everybody know your political persuasions is Facebook and Twitter or whatever it is, any kind of social media. And then that gets amplified. The media can pick and choose. Nowadays, you see articles on the internet that are nothing other than a compilation of Twitter messages that they put together for some reason, right? So they're picking tweets out of the Twitterverse and then putting it into an article that's then put on the internet. You talk about propaganda. And this is not anywhere near a majority of normal people. Okay, very few people even use Twitter at all. Okay, so Twitter is like one of those things when you were mentioning earlier is like.
But it's also I think it's more than, I think it's Facebook. Like, say for example Facebook, right? And because everybody's on Facebook, everybody uses it. You know, we use it in different ways, but. You know, say you support Trump. I don't support Trump. You and I get along fine.
Yes.
And we actually get along great. We're
friends.
We're
great friends.
And but did somebody like you, or somebody, you know, like you, just a Trump supporter, would you have created, you know, these memes of like Donald Trump like holding a baby in a flag, or, you know, Nancy Pelosi doing crazy stuff? No, you wouldn't have created that on your own time, but maybe you want to share it, and maybe it's a more provocative meme.
Sure.
And that meme is being created, you know, by a Russian propagandist, and it's made specifically so that Jamin will see it and say, yeah, that's right. You know, Pelosi's gonna kill all babies.
Sure.
And I should share this on my Facebook. And so I didn't think it, I didn't make it, but that kind of resonates with me, so I'm going to share it. And then you know, your friends like it, or your friends share it, and then it's it's viral around the United States, and it's a thought that wasn't created in the United States, but it takes hold. And then people start really, and then you see another one the next day and the next day, and you keep sharing it, or you keep liking it, and so then, you know, you're getting even more into your feed, and you suddenly become, you know, more extreme than maybe you were the day before, and only online. Because if you were to see me in the street, we'd still be
Sure.
close friends, even though I don't believe the same things that you
Well,
believe.
then ultimately, then of course, like in a vacuum, then what does it matter, right? Because I don't want to be censoring anything,
Mhm.
so I can handle it. I can see these things, whether they come from. Because here's the example. I don't want to get into like the boogeymen. So yes, there's boogeymen who wherever else on the world, who create these memes and they put them on U.S. social media, whether their intent is to propagandize for some reason, or is it just to for shits and giggles, because there's a huge crowd of people online who are just trolls who are addicted to the 4chan, the 8chan, the Reddit. They get off on that. It's fun. They have nothing else to do. It's like their hobby, right? It's part of the Facebook addiction. Is they put out this meme and then they get all these responses and it's euphoric in a way. For however many there are in the world, there's just as many in the United States who are capable of doing it. I don't think there's any kind of sophisticated, crazy, next level Facebook propaganda that's going on that is above and beyond the abilities of just people in their basement here in the U.S.
Yeah, but that's why I think that's wrong. I think that the United States intelligence service has said exactly that. There is highly sophisticated, highly motivated.
What do you think's going on here?
Entities.
This is a highly sophisticated operation going on here too.
Exactly.
So you're telling me
we're fighting back.
So I have the opportunity. Well, yes, I like that you mentioned that. This is one way when you're saying the solutions to what we're kind of talking about.
But we need to acknowledge that it exists, and it exists on both sides. So I just want us to acknowledge the fact that there are highly skilled, highly motivated, highly advanced technologically entities like the Russian government or the Chinese government who are actively trying to persuade us, or not even persuade us, just to divide us.
Sure.
And by saying that, somebody in his basement could do it, I don't think that's right. I think we're talking, I don't know how advanced, I don't know what they're doing, but I wouldn't be surprised if entire Facebook groups of 100,000 people, say there's 100,000 people, right, in this for Trump or for Biden group. And so you join it, you say, wow, there's 100,000 people in here. But you don't realize you're the only person that's real.
Sure,
and
they're all
there's
bots.
100,000 bots.
Yeah.
And they're all making comments, and they're all posting memes. Or maybe and they say, we're going to create 100,000 bots, and we want to get 5 people to change their mind.
Sure.
And I'm sure that this is how it's working. I don't know. It's probably much more sophisticated than that. But I guarantee you there's thousands of groups with hundreds of thousands of members each, in which the majority of the members are bots. And they are purposefully trying to change your mind or trying to harden your mind one way or another. And so I think it's just something that we have to acknowledge, and we can't just dismiss it as something that...
Don't you think... So the person who... I'm not involved. Haven't joined. I don't subscribe to any Facebook groups. I mean, some, very few, but none that are political. So I'm not like on some Latinos for Trump political, group or this or that. I am in the I think it's called magisms or something. Just basically get into exactly what you're talking about. They're probably a whole bunch of bots. Yeah. They could be a bunch of Russians who are putting it. These are just funny memes. To me, as an educated adult, I'm looking at that not for political insight. I'm looking at that for political humor. It's all fun and games. I have never seen one of these from one of those groups where it's taken literally, or I'm looking at it as like this is the source of some kind of real information, right? So,
but that humor. And the lightheartedness and all that is exactly what propaganda is. If you look back to the propaganda of the Second World War and making fun of Japanese people or Japanese cartoons about Japanese people, you're belittling a group of people. So
this has been going on for a long time, is what you're saying. Nothing's changed. It's not like all of a sudden the Russians are behind Trump and so now we're all being propagandized on Facebook. You're saying there's many other examples in which even through humor, whatever it may be, and the cartoons in the New York Times in the 40s referring to the Japanese in some type of way.
Yeah.
That it's we can laugh at them because they're the enemy.
Right, but it is propaganda, and it is it is making you think a certain way about certain people, and it's not that you now that you see that cartoon, you're a racist, but it gives you a little bit of leeway one way or another, and the only thing that social media has done is turned that dial from
way up.
100 from 10 to 100.
Absolutely right. Good point.
And so that's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is something to think about, and I think we're going to find out more about it, eventually, and I think it's going to surprise us.
Well, I think sitting down, doing podcasts. We're saying some of the solution, and the solution is, unfortunately, where we're going. A lot of people don't want to talk. They've taken it to this level where we're done talking. They'd rather do something else. I don't know. Or they want to deplatform. So this whole agenda of, we don't even want to talk to you, right? There's no talking going on. To me, that's the opposite way. So on these podcasts, the reason why you do I think podcasting is the future. Podcasting can be the solution. And I think what better way to sit down and talk to somebody. So the Joe Rogan, tying this all together, is Joe Rogan and Trump, Joe Rogan and Biden. Wouldn't it be great if they could? I think it would be a huge step for when they talk about bringing people together. No one person. It's foolhardy to believe that either Trump or Biden or even Obama, one person's going to be president and then they're going to bring the country together. It's impossible. Okay, This is an impossibility. But I think you can. I don't know, wishful thinking. Those are pipe dreams. But, I think a step in the right direction is, hey, Trump and Biden can get in the same room. They can sit in there for 4 hours and talk like civilized people and then leave and nobody gets shot. It is what it is. That's a step in the right direction, and that's brought to you, or that's made available because of podcasting.
Yeah.
Saving the world, Daniel. All right?
Yeah.
All right, I got to run. I got this phone call 2 times.